Welcome back everyone to Self-Serving Skillet. Today I'm gonna make for you some hot and sour soup, and this comes down to just two elements, and everything beyond that is sort of extras. We're building flavors, we're building layers of flavor. But what makes it hot and sour, vinegar of your choice, and white peppercorns. If you don't have white peppercorns, you can use black peppercorns. I would use 1.5 times what I'm using here though. White peppercorns are a little bit more pungent, a little bit more aromatic, a little bit more spicy than black peppercorns. You can also use any type of vinegar that you'd like. I really like the rice vinegar for this recipe, but if you don't want any flavor from your acid at all, you can use white vinegar. And then it also depends on the flavors that you're using, the other ingredients. How does that flavor profile work with, say, what I'm using? If you have a lot of beef in your soup, if you're using a beef stock, for instance, or you want little slices of beef in there, I might go with a red wine vinegar. Or if you go chicken or maybe tofu, a lot of times this does have an element of tofu in it. I have pork loin in my freezer, so in the spirit of using what I have and actually something that I like, I'm gonna use the pork loin. But anyway, rice wine vinegar is my choice for this guy. Also, I'll be using this Tom Yum soup set. And the reason I picked this up is that at the Asian market, which if you don't have an Asian market in your neighborhood, online is a beautiful place, but if there's someplace local that you can support, please do that. But at my particular Asian market, they didn't have lemongrass, but I did find this Tom Yum soup set, and I was shopping for lemongrass and lime leaves, and I wasn't going to buy a chili because I have so many dried chilies, but they've got a chili in here, so I'll use that. And the other thing is galangal, gal angel, gul. I'm gonna look this up and report back. And galangal, as I figured out with my 15 minutes of internet research before starting to film today, is also a rhizome like ginger, but it has a very different flavor profile, more citrusy, more piney, kind of the IPA of roots, of rhizome roots. So I'm gonna leave that out. I'm gonna stick that back in my freezer, use it later, and I'll use ginger instead because that's the flavor that I know I want. Now I'm gonna start by rehydrating a couple of dried mushrooms, and I usually like a variety of mushrooms in this soup, but I found this big old bag of dried shiitakes, dried whole shiitakes, for a pretty reasonable price. So I'm gonna do an all shiitake soup today. I'm gonna get these into a hot water bath, 10-15 minutes, and then I'm gonna slice them thin. Now, there are a couple of flavors that I want to extract from that soup kit here, and I'm gonna do that in my chicken stock. Now, this is the chicken stock that we made together on Patreon. If you missed that, link is in the description below to my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can view every piece of content on this show ad-free and an equal amount of water. And that's just because I want about a quart of liquid, about a liter of liquid. And this, as we said on the show, is pretty concentrated. I wanted to concentrate it down so it could be more useful to me if I was trying to reduce it anyway. To use these lemongrass stalks here, I'm going to trim off this root end, and I want to take off 2 layers of grass. The first 2 layers, that's gonna be a little bit too bitter in the soup, and I'll put these in to start extracting their flavor. And we can even turn this heat down because I want this to extract nice and slow and low. There's some other stuff that we're going to be able to do while this is working. And then this chili, I don't really know how hot it is. It smells like it's about a medium to medium high heat. So I just seeded it. I just caught a whiff of it. That's actually gonna be fairly spicy. So I de-seeded it, and I'm just going to let it extract a little bit of flavor into my soup. I don't want this to burn you up. Like I said, the hot element of this is supposed to come from the white pepper. And then the lime leaves. Now, every recipe that I see calls for maybe 2 or 3. I'm just gonna add the whole thing. See what happens. I'll taste it in a bit. If it's too strong, I'll take them out. So while that's at a simmer, chicken stock is on Patreon on the duck egg level. That's a couple levels above the $1 a month level. And I counted the other day, to date, I have 20 pieces of content on there, 5 of which are unique to Patreon. So we're starting to get another show together. So go check that out. We'll let that sit behind me on the actual stovetop, save the fuel for this camp stove. I had a whole bunch of these pork loin chops sitting in my freezer. Now, if you're doing this from refrigerator cold, I recommend throwing them in the freezer for maybe an hour, get them a little crispy. That makes them a little easier to cut. If you're doing this from freezer cold, the same thing. I recommend that you bring them out, you put them in the refrigerator for about an hour, hour and a half. You'll achieve roughly the same effect, but they're going to be so much easier to slice thin if you give them a little freeze. We're going to slice this down one side, just like we're cutting this with a steak knife if we're going to eat strips of it. And then, once that's all done, we're gonna turn it the other way and make sort of matchsticks. And that's what's gonna go in our soup. Now, after we get our pork sliced nice and thin, and by the way, you can do this with chicken, you can do this with steak. Maybe don't do this exact part with the tofu, but I'm going to go through a process called velveting, and that's going to make our meat very tender, even when simmered in liquid. A lot of times when you put a piece of protein into a simmering liquid, it'll seize up. And this is a really good way. This is kind of a stir frying method, but it's gonna work here too, and it's going to keep our pork super tender. So I wanna wash this. Now, when you're cutting it thin like this and you run water over it, it's not the same as if you're washing like a whole chicken, all right? You wash a whole chicken, you're gonna get splatter all over your kitchen. You do it nice and controlled like this in a colander at the bottom of the sink. You wring it out, you're wringing out all that pigment, some of the mineral content. You're really sort of tenderizing it at the same time as well. This is gonna be perfectly fine. Just wash your sink later. You're gonna be awesome. And then when we have this all drained and dried, we're gonna throw it back in the bowl and we're gonna marinate it just long enough for us to get the rest of our ingredients together. This doesn't need to go overnight, although it could. And our marinade is going to be equal parts of Chinese light soy sauce. Chinese light soy sauce is different than Chinese dark soy sauce, which we will use in our soup. I think it has a little bit of a sharper taste as well. It's like the snare drum. It's bright pops of color, whereas the Chinese dark soy sauce is deeper, richer, a little bit sweeter, but it's mellow at the same time. So equal parts Chinese light soy sauce, toasted sesame oil, and Shaoxing wine. If you can't find or don't have Shaoxing wine, or all you have is dry sherry, please use the dry sherry. I don't want you to go out and spend a whole bunch of money on something you might make once. But if you're gonna make it multiple times, it is well worth the investment, I say, as a person that's made it multiple times and sits here with dry sherry. And to that, I'm gonna add about 1/8 teaspoon of baking soda to make it a little more alkaline. And then I want about 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. I really, really like allspice with pork, and this is going to get boiled and washed out anyway, so I'm not going to be left with a lot. It's just going to be there to give you that extra, oh, that was some nice pork. Mushrooms are done, and I'm actually going to use this liquid, this mushroom water. I did wash them before I put them in that pot to get any residual dirt off, but I do want that mushroom flavor kind of present in my soup. So then I'm gonna take these and I'm just going to slice them sort of thinly so that they sit nicely in my soup. These probably could have done with another minute or two, but that's fine. Just really finish these off because I think they do just need a little bit more soak. I'll throw them back into the soup here, and that should be very nice. Silly me, I meant to taste it and pull the lemongrass and the lime leaves and such out of it before I put those mushrooms in. Glad I didn't add anything else. Oof. That's a nice flavor right there. So we'll get those out of there until I can see nothing but mushrooms. And we'll be right back after this commercial break. All right, the final step of velveting this meat, we want to get a pot of water to a rolling boil here, and we're just going to deposit this right into our boiling water, and right away I'm going to try to break it up. I want to break it up. I want everything to sort of cook at the same rate, and this is going to go really, really fast. So if you're getting any value out of this video, like the video. Let YouTube know I'm doing a good job. Share it with someone who might be interested in using what they have in hot and sour soup, in cooking for 1 or 2 people, or might just like to hang out with me once a week. We're already done. I'm gonna take all of this lovely velveted meat and I'm gonna transfer it over to my soup. It smells amazing and looks exactly how I want it to. Let's get that other one. There we go. All right, and we're all done with that. Now that everything's in one pot, I'm gonna add my hot and sour mix. And all of this is, for this amount of soup, is 1/4 cup of rice wine vinegar, 1/8 cup or 2 ounces, 4 tablespoons of Chinese dark soy sauce, and a tablespoon of white pepper, ground white pepper. So we're gonna wait until this gets to a simmer, till I start to see some bubbles. We're going to stir this in, let it simmer for about 5 minutes, and then we have an egg trick. Now this has been going for 5-6 minutes, something like that. We should give it a taste because this is really the last point where we can add a lot to it without disrupting the balance, I guess. That's amazing. I really enjoy that. This is also the point where you could add a cornstarch slurry if you'd like to. Take about 2 or 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, mix that in an equal amount of water. Once it's dissolved, stir it into the hot liquid, I don't like mine with the cornstarch. I know that a lot of people do, so it's right here that you would add it if you do like it. But what I do like is a little egg. And right here I have 2 beaten eggs, and I just want this at a simmer. I want these eggs to start to cook as soon as they hit the liquid here. So let's just go in with a little bit here, and those will kind of form up into strands. This comes off the heat. I'm gonna plate it up. I'm gonna put some away, and then we're gonna taste. You really should serve this soup right away, but since I did this last time, this is how I'll display continuity. I got 4 servings out of this recipe, and we'll probably have 2 tonight and then 2 later in the week. Let's dig in. I can garnish with, well, I did garnish with cilantro because I had it, and I can garnish with a little more of that toasted sesame seed oil and this chili oil that I made here. If you want to make the chili oil, just put some crushed red peppers in a jar, let's say a tablespoon, and then top it off with a neutral flavored oil. I'm gonna taste this first before I do anything else to it though. Let's get a little broth. And that's lovely. That is both hot and sour. My initial reaction is to say, oh, you could add some more vinegar to that. But as I go through, I know that I'm going to get, my mouth is going to get more acidic as I go through. So I'll reserve my judgment until I've had a few bites. Let's get some of all of these ingredients here. This pork, this mushroom, some of this egg. Now, you don't have to velvet the meat. You can put it right in, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is a very pleasant texture though, so I'm glad I did it. Shiitake mushrooms, super meaty, very nice flavor. This whole dish is just very complete. All right, let's top it with a little bit of this oil. There we go, little bubbles floating to the surface there. And then, fresh spoon. Little chili oil, little dots of a little bit of heat. There we go. That's very nice. You know, that's just another layer of flavor. The toasted sesame oil is in the pork already, so that's one layer, and then we have the very fresh, like uncooked layer on top. I really enjoy that. Chili oil is coming in on the back end. This is a fairly new chili oil. It hasn't had a lot of time to extract. I made it this morning. As time goes on, you will get a spicier and spicier chili oil. Get in the kitchen and make yourself something amazing. If you missed last week's episode where I made a seafoodless chowder, I'm gonna leave that right over here. More soup recipes from last January right over here. If you haven't seen the chicken stock on Patreon, go check out Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can get all of this content ad-free.